A lot of ones. So type one, if you've ever appeared on a podcast as a guest. A little experiment for the 40 odd people that are in here right now. Crikey, there's a lot
Can't
of
keep count. I see a lot of ones here.
a lot of ones.
A lot of ones.
When we were doing it with just you and I, this was much easier to count the ones.
Yeah, it was. It was. By the way, in real time, Elliot was counting percentages. Now I'm not sure that it will be possible, but we'll see. We'll see his math skills. We see more ones coming. Thanks a lot, everyone. Right, can we move on now?
Yeah, man. Comment 2, if you've ever turned your interview into content. Now, what we should be seeing here is we've obviously just seen a load of ones. We should, in theory, see slightly less twos. So we had, out of 45, 50 people, we probably had over 20 ones, would you guess?
Yeah, 100%. It was more than 20.
Maybe more than 20, 25 ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 twos. So that is a nice little experiment there where we can demonstrate loads of people are appearing on podcasts as a guest, but not many of us are actually using that content or using that interview and turning it into content.
And basically appearing on podcasts as a guest is not that complicated. You just accept invitation, you jump on a podcast, you answer questions, and that's it. But then extracting value is. And the truth is that most guests, 99% of guests, don't check the stats on this. I'm not sure whether it is actually correct, but majority of guests, they just deliver an interview and then they're out. And very often they don't even send thank you note to the podcast host. So they jump on the podcast and that's pretty much it for them. They don't do anything with the podcast interview after. And 1% of guests, they're actually strategic about their podcast appearances. And they know how to turn their podcast appearances into content. And maybe they also network with hosts. But we'll be talking about the first one on this webinar. So our promise to you is that in the next 45 minutes, we'll teach you how to be the 1%. We'll teach you how to turn your podcast interviews into content.
When we talk about the first GIF, that first GIF is wild. Yeah. That is wild.
Yeah, it is. It is. Elle, this is for you. This is so exciting, by the way. This offer.
Yeah, so we've got an offer where we will, for free, 100% for free. I don't know what that even means, but for free, if you've had a podcast interview that is live, that can be found somewhere on the internet, we will turn that podcast episode into 3 still images and 3 little snippet videos completely for free. If you haven't, and if you're not lucky enough to have been a guest on a podcast as yet, we do have a special offer at the end of this presentation, at the end of this webinar for you guys as well. So there's 2 offers at the end here as well.
All right. Agenda.
So in the next 45 minutes, we will be putting ourselves under quite a bit of pressure to do this in 45 minutes, but we have got the opportunity, the how and the when. So what is the opportunity? How can you do it? And when is the right time? What different types of content you can create from your interviews. So there's a load of different types of content. The 3 biggest bottlenecks that most people severely underestimate. Our secret podcast content strategy. There's a bit of a debate about whether we should actually include this. We decided to. Going to be giving away a little bit of secret sauce at the end. And we do have a Q&A section at the end of the webinar. However, what we always say when we're doing this is, if you've got a question and it is somewhat in relation to what we're talking about, just type it into the Q&A box and we'll try and answer as we go. So Andy, you've already kicked this off. Does this assume the podcast was a video? No. This is both audio and video as well that we are talking about. Can you make sure that you're posting your questions in the Q&A section, not in the chat? It's just easier for me to answer and then get rid of them. Cool.
All right, let's continue.
Let's go. So I'm Elliot Chapman, one of the joint CEOs here at Speak On Podcasts. Myself and Dom acquired SOP back in December. We were introduced, fell in love with the company. I did also fall in love with Jakob and Mark, but fell in love with the company. And here we are 6 months on into this wild and crazy journey.
It's been a crazy journey so far, and I absolutely love it, Elliot. So my name is Jakob, and me and Mark, the co-founder, we started this agency in June 2020. Since then, we booked more than 2,500 interviews. We worked with pretty large brands across multiple different industries with more than 150 speakers, over 120 campaigns. And in December, as Elliot mentioned, they approached us and we got acquired, and right now we're building it together. Super excited to be here. So let's dive in. So podcast guesting, an ultimate content strategy for founders and executives. L, the opportunity.
Yes, the opportunity. So we're going to talk about the traditional way of creating content. And a little disclaimer, this is by no means criticizing the traditional way. We still use the traditional way. It's just to compare the two different styles. So number one, you got to come up with all the content ideas. Typically, this falls on you, your team, potentially working with an agency, but it is ultimately you that has to come up with all the ideas and the content. You've got to orchestrate the entire process. So you've actually got to pull everything together, whether that be designers, whether that be whatever it is. You've got to essentially project manage that whole process. Number three, you've got to actually create the content as well. Again, this could be you personally, it could be your team, it could be outsourced, but ultimately it is relying on you. And then finally, we're going to talk about distribution a lot today. You've also got to distribute the content as well. And this, like we said, it obviously can be done, but it does take up a lot of time, not mentioned in this slide, but a lot of resource if you're not doing it yourself. And to do it consistently, this is where a lot of companies fall down, because to do it consistently is a bit of a slog. There is no other way to dress this up. That is why social media companies, content companies do so well, because that is their one single focus, and it is a bit of a slog.
Yeah, and the thing is, I believe that most founders and executives, they know that, they should be putting out content, they should be active on LinkedIn or whatever platform they choose, but it's just difficult to do it consistently because of all of these things that we mentioned, in the traditional way, and to do it at scale for a long time, it just takes a lot of time. Now, I would like to suggest an alternative, which offers the same benefits, but it actually requires way less time, and it's the reason why we're all here, and that's the podcast guesting way. So the host suggests the content idea. They're interested in you as a speaker. So they say, hey, I would like to discuss this. Maybe you jump on a pre-interview chat, you align on the exact angle, and then, the idea was decided. Step number two, you just join the interview and answer questions. And I'm not sure about you, but for me, if I should sit right now for 45 minutes or 1 hour and just, talk to camera and create content, it would be just much more difficult compared to if Elliot would be asking me questions and I would be just answering. And it is just much easier to create content like this, thought leadership content like this, compared to if you'd be just creating content yourself. Then you can easily repurpose this long form content into short form social media snippets. And there's actually guaranteed distribution by the host. For those of you who actually appeared on podcast and you turned that podcast into content, let me know in the comments if you actually created that content but never distributed it. For me, this was one of the biggest issues. I always had a lot of content created, and then it was just being in the Google Drive folder, and I wasn't distributing it. So focusing on distribution is so important. And when you are appearing on podcast, there is guaranteed distribution by the host.
This is like a little confessions corner. There are just shy of 100 people in this webinar right now. And I would love to see who is genuinely guilty of clogging up memory, clogging up space in their Google Drive or in their Dropbox with content that they were meant to distribute and post. Because I am absolutely one of the guilty parties.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's see the comments going. And the thing is that by investing only around 2 hours every month, you can create months worth of thought leadership content. Something that would be super difficult to do if you wouldn't be using podcasts and if you'd be just sitting and creating content on the spot. And on top of that, it's just much easier to scale than the traditional method. All you have to do is just add more speakers into the mix, right? So if you are a CEO, why not to invite your CMO to guest on some marketing related podcasts? So you can do exactly the same thing, but with more speakers from your company. And the bottom line is that by using this strategy, you can turn your podcast interviews into unlimited expert level content faster and actually much cheaper compared to most traditional methods. And this is how you do it, Elliot.
This is how you do it. So number one is, it's kind of a prereq here, but you do actually have to appear as a guest on a podcast. Very difficult to deliver what we're about to deliver if you're not appearing as a guest on a podcast. Number two, straightforward. You turn your interview into content. We're going to talk about the different forms. We're going to talk about the different styles and how you actually do that and the cost in just a second. And then the third one, you actually have to distribute your content. We've just seen in the chat of the just shy of 100 people, I guarantee the majority of us as busy founders, busy execs, whatever we may be, have had content just sat there waiting to be distributed.
Yeah, and I would also add that, to make this strategy successful long term, it's a good idea to appear on more podcasts. So if you just have one podcast, then you won't really get all the benefits of like economics of scale. So it's just much better if you have more podcasts already recorded or about to be recorded, and then you throw them into a content creation machine, and you will just create tons of content from it.
Andy Brown, just a second, Jakob, will you touch on how to find podcasts and how to approach them, i.e. interviewee brand? So our last webinar that we did about 6 weeks ago was on exactly this. We can include that webinar in this in the email that goes out. So we'll include
where we'll be sharing the replay. We'll also share the replay of that last webinar.
Yeah, exactly.
So this webinar is only about how to turn your podcast appearances into content.
So a couple of examples. We've got a number of clients that are doing this, one of which is a $30 million MSP company, and they use this strategy with 4 execs across their company, across their portfolio, who are distributing their content onto LinkedIn and onto various other social media platforms. A $500 million SaaS company has used this strategy with us, with 2 different speakers. And again, we'll go into the different types of content forms in just a second. And then finally, a 6-figure sales coach is currently doing this and is absolutely smashing sales as a result of this organic strategy.
Now, the big question is when to actually use this strategy. So there are 3 musts. So you must have a podcast episode that's live. So very often people say that they already recorded an episode, but there is actually a lot of time that passes after you appear on podcast and then when the podcast episode goes live. So I would definitely recommend that you need to have at least 1 episode live. The more, the better, really. You must have the capacity to create content, and that means either in-house that your designers will do it, or you will work with a freelancer or with some agency. And obviously, again, I cannot stress this enough, you must distribute content. So don't underestimate the distribution part. Don't just focus on production part, but also plan for distribution as you are creating your content. So content creation is not the main issue. The distribution is. So, sorry?
Controversial.
It is, but it is true.
Yeah.
And we've seen it in the chat, that people were basically commenting that a lot of content is just sitting in their Google Drive folders.
We're all lazy. That's the problem. So what type of content can you create from just one interview? Well, there are a lot of different examples, and the first of which is short form videos. Andy, you mentioned at the very top of this, I think the question was around, is it just video? You can obviously do video styles like this that you'll see on Twitter, you'll see on Instagram, you'll see on Facebook, you'll see them popping up on your LinkedIn feed all the time. but you can also do something like this with an audiogram. An audiogram is where you see the voice squiggly line, the subtitles overlaid on top. So if there is no video, then you can still create a video format from just the audiogram as well.
In full transparency though, videos like two talking heads always perform much better than just audiogram. It's simply just more engaging when you see two people talking. So if there's an option, you know, always choose to record video, because it just gives you much more like opportunities to create more engaging content. But if it's audio podcast only, that's fine too. And we'll actually share a strategy on how you can overcome this if it's audio podcast only.
Nice. Jakob, there was a question. What should be the ideal length of the short form videos?
It really depends on the platform where you're posting it, right? On LinkedIn, I think that you can post something around 2 minutes. I was posting anywhere from 1 minute to 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes even. And usually between 1 to 2 minutes, it was performing the best. But then you see people like Chris Walker, they just post 8-minute long video, but you already need to have that, I would say, credibility, and you need to be very established in your network, so people will actually invest 8 minutes of their time to watch the full video. So I would definitely start with 1 minute to 2 minute long videos if you're just starting with the strategy, and if you're maybe just building your social media profile.
Solid. The next example is images. No doubt if everybody's on Instagram, you would have seen these tiles somewhere on your friend's Instagram feed. It could be on some of those quote type feeds. This is another example of how you could position yourself from a personal brand perspective based on some of the things that you've said in the most recent podcast, and give that particular podcast a little plug.
Yes, always use these pieces of content as teasers for the full episode, right? Although that not like only a couple of people will click that link, you know, to listen to the full episode. You know, it also helps you to build relationship with the host, you know, just say, hey, I appeared on this podcast, you know, use this visual as a teaser, you know, to catch attention of people on social media, and just say, hey, listen to the full thing here.
Cool. I'm going to answer a couple of questions. There's a couple of questions that have flown in. Can we try and put questions into the Q&A box, just so it's a little bit easier for us to manage whether they've been answered or not? I'm going to answer those questions in just a second, Jakob, once we get to the end of the types of content. The third, and probably one of my favorite at the moment, is creating either articles or blogs. The reason why I like this at the moment is you can leverage things like ChatGPT, pull the transcript of your podcast, pop that into ChatGPT and ask it to create 3 or 4 different blogs for you, or 3 or 4 different articles. Creating long form style is something that we are really trialing at the moment, and something that's getting us quite excited by using AI.
And
you know,
the thing is, don't just post transcription on your blog and say this is the article. I actually see a lot of people do this. You know, they transcribe their full podcast episodes, they post it on their blog. Hey, this article. No one will read it. It's nice. There are 8,000 words, but you know, the way we talk is not the way we write. So really, just spend time to write proper article, or hire an agency who will write this article for you.
Nice. Similar to blogs, articles, you can turn this into an email newsletter. You can somehow incorporate what you've already said into an email newsletter. If you're appearing on, let's just say, 1 podcast every single month, which is, from a time commitment perspective, quite doable, you could turn that particular podcast, whatever that topic is, into some form of topic of conversation for your email newsletter. And follow-ups, just got to clarify, this is from a sales perspective. If you're using outbound sales, you could somehow try and leverage either your personal brand, some topic of conversation in your follow-ups. Disclaimer, never use the word follow-up in sales. It is a massive no-no, but we didn't know how else to make it really, really clear.
Yeah, I mean, imagine that you are having a call with your prospect, and then next day you are speaking on podcast about a very similar topic. It is a really nice email to send to your prospect, something like, hey, just spoke on this podcast about the topic we discussed a while ago. Listen to it here. it's just a really cool touch point, much better than just circling back. Then you can actually use Twitter threads. So this is actually something that I don't see many people do, that many people would be doing. I used example here from Olga Andrienko from SEMrush, and she does it really well. You basically create a Twitter thread and you share maybe like 5 key points that you shared in the podcast. And the last tweet is actually listen to the full podcast here. And she mentioned that it actually performs very well for her. And lastly, this is so exciting, Spotify playlist. So you can basically find most of your podcast appearances on Spotify. So just if you have an account on Spotify, just create a playlist of all of your appearances, and you can include this in your, for example, email signature, and just say, listen to my recent podcast appearance, or listen to my podcast appearances here. And, Spotify will open and people can listen to one of your many podcast appearances.
A couple of questions. Nicholas Snell, my webinars are 30 to 60 minutes long. Do you mean we should crop them to minute-long snippets?
No, what I mean is that you will find let's say 10 key points, like the best golden nuggets from that episode, from the webinar, and you will create 1 to 2 minute long videos. Yep. So it's not that you would make your webinar shorter, but you need to find the best bits. And that's what we'll be actually talking about right now in the main bottlenecks, 3 main bottlenecks of the strategy.
And just before you do that, Jakob, anonymous attendee has asked, I've been using the free Microsoft video editor for trimming my podcast interviews. Is there a better tool that's free or inexpensive for editing?
It really depends what you need, right? If you need transcription, so basically adding more, adding subtitles there, there will be usually some cost involved because it takes some computing power to do it. But I know that a lot of people are actually using Descript, which is a really good tool, or you can use a tool veed.io that also works quite well. There are plenty of tools for this. And the thing is, the tools are actually not the main issue, or creating designing the content is not the main issue with this strategy. And I will now share 3 biggest bottlenecks of this strategy. So first, I already mentioned time to air, because you appear on podcast, mentioned that you appear on podcast tomorrow, and it can take 6 months or 4 months or 3 months before that episode actually goes live. So that's a lot of time, so it's not that predictable compared to, for example, if you just sit now and record content, you immediately have it. But I will share, a secret strategy on how you can overcome this bottleneck. So every time when you're using this strategy, just make sure that you take this into an account. Then production. So this is, I would say, one of the key things most people underestimate. They are like, okay, I can create video, or I can find someone on Fiverr to create the video for me. Then they share the podcast episode with them, and then they receive the videos, but they don't like the videos. And the reason why they don't like the videos is because the creator, the video editor, they just didn't find the best bits, best pieces of content, best golden nuggets from your podcast appearance. And that's because they are not experts in your topic. You are. So imagine that you are a revenue attribution expert, and you share it with a designer who loves to create nice pictures and edit videos. And you say, send me 3 snippets. They want to know what is interesting enough, so very often you will need to provide specific timestamps. And if you don't want to do it, then you will probably need to pay a little bit more to find someone who's specializing in this area, or maybe someone from your team who can do it for you. But do not underestimate this part. And then again, the distribution. Don't just create content and don't let it sit in your Google Drive folder. When you are creating content, plan for distribution as well. Don't just create a content and then think about, okay, where do we actually distribute it? As you are creating an assignment for your designers, make sure that you know where this piece of content will be posted. And it's just much easier to then prevent that it will be just, in your Google Drive folder. So just a quick recap, time to air, use this strategy if you don't mind waiting for your episodes to go live. Production, use this strategy if you have time, or you can hire someone who will find the best bits for you. And then distribution, you use the strategy only if you know that you will distribute your content.
Nice.
And sorry, do we have any questions, El?
No questions. No, I was just looking at the attendees, and I saw that Marlon Madden is listening in. Dom and I had an interview with Marlon.
Oh, nice.
Last week, and we had an absolute scream. It was such good fun. So hello Marlon.
Awesome. So this is how you do it right. Step number one, you need to decide on the formats. So imagine that now you have your podcast episode, right? You appeared on the podcast, already went live. Awesome. You want to turn it into content. So the first step you need to do is, okay, what do I actually want to create? Do you want to create images? You want to create articles? Do you want to create video snippets? Do you want to create emails? And based on that, you will actually need to plan your resources. So can you do it in-house? Do you have the capacity in-house to do all of this? Or do you need to hire someone to do it for you? And there are a lot of people on Upwork, on Fiverr, there are specialized agencies who will help you to create each piece of content that you want. But you need to plan your resources upfront. And also you need to decide what's your budget if you decide to outsource. Then you need to choose your episode. So this is the favorite trick that actually a lot of our customers are using, and I shared it on LinkedIn multiple times, and it was always a huge success. Just go to listennotes.com and search for your name in quotes, and it will give you a full list of your episodes of all your podcasts that you appeared on, and then you can sort them by date. And then you have pretty much a complete list of all episodes that you can repurpose. And remember this strategy, because I'll be talking about this at the end when we'll be giving you that offer to create content for you completely for free, but I will repeat it there. Then obviously you need to create the content. So you need to turn your podcast appearance into the formats, into the piece of content that you decided on in the step one. And then you need to distribute the content. So once all the content is ready, just use your content planner or plan it natively in the social media platforms that you want to post everything on.
Quick question, Jakob,
Sure.
from Indranil. Indranil, I hope I've done your name justice. If I haven't, I am so sorry. Spotify, YouTube, and even Twitter now allow long form content with video. Any other channel that you suggest in case we're going with video? The only other, you could still do TikTok, YouTube. Any others, Jakob?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. So if it's a video podcast only, so if you want to distribute a long form video, well, then I think YouTube is the way you need to do it. But then you obviously need to treat YouTube video differently than you would treat a piece of content on social media. And if you're having a video podcast, I know that Spotify now, yes, natively support video as well, but I'm not sure if I really understood the question.
I think you did it justice.
Okay.
And I'm glad I pronounced it well.
L to you.
So how much does this cost? Now, this is obviously going to depend quite drastically on the different types of content that you need, and also how much time you can invest. But what we wanted to do was, we've seen a lot of webinars and a lot of talks where you get given this information and then you leave going, how on earth do I even start? Where do I even start? So these ballpark figures are quite vast in their differentiation. However, it does give you some idea, and there is also a justification in just a second. So images, anything between $5 and $100 per image that you get created. Video, 10 to 300, and an article between 50 and 500. You can use agencies. There are a lot of agencies out there, or you could use freelancers from places like Fiverr or Upwork, freelancer.com. All these places will have the right level of skilled people there to help you.
And the keyword I would recommend searching for is podcast content repurposing or podcast repurposing. Just search for this and you will find a lot of people who can do this for you.
Yeah, for sure. And the next slide, Jakob, justifies kind of what we're saying here. So a lot of the time with most things, the lower the cost, the more time you will normally personally have to invest into the project. When I first saw this graphic, it kind of blew my mind slightly, hence the explanation. So the less you spend, the more time you're going to have to invest into it. The more you spend, the less time you're going to have to invest into it. Hope I got that the right way around. On the real lower side, in terms of spend, you're going to have to give much more detailed descriptions and instructions on what you want. You'll have to give them the timestamps. So let's say, for example, your podcast interview is around 30 minutes long. You can't just give it to the lowest paid person that you're going to do and expect quality to come back. You're going to have to say, I want the timestamp between 5 minutes 30 and 6 minutes 30, for example. And that is exactly what I want. There'll be a load of back and forth, and often the design will be quite poor. Somewhere in the middle, you'll have fewer revisions. So yes, you might be spending more, but you definitely will still be required to make those revisions. It's going to be a long way from perfect. However, the creator will often find the best bits for you. So you probably won't have to give them the timestamps. They will probably invest their time to find those best bits. However, there will be a lot of back and forth. And then the more you spend, little to no revisions, normally 1, maybe 2 max revisions. The idea here is the more you spend, the less stress you have. You just go away and focus on posting and distributing.
And the thing is, all of these strategies work. It's not that we would be telling you just go with the most expensive one, because obviously it's not the smart way for all of us. If you can spend more time, if you can invest more time, you can go with this one, right? But just expect that it will take slightly more time.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, now the exciting part. So I actually posted about this on LinkedIn today, and I said I will be sharing our secret podcast content strategy. And if you're not using it, you're missing out big time. And then, once people clicked see more on LinkedIn, I actually didn't share what it was. And I said, you need to join the webinar. And I immediately got comment like, what the hell? Like, this is TikTok stuff. Like, don't just give teasers. But you're here. So let's dive into it. So this secret strategy, I actually don't see anyone talking about it. It eliminates the time to air bottleneck and puts you in control of your content without waiting for the podcast host. So imagine that you record a podcast episode, and even if it's audio only, the next day you immediately have content. It also allows you to create high quality video content, even if the podcast is audio only, and all you need is a smartphone. And this is actually how you do it. This is how, and why it's so awesome, and why some of the biggest creators actually use it. But I haven't seen it anywhere described it like this. So you just record yourself while delivering the interview, and then you repurpose this recording. So as you are on the podcast, you're answering all the questions, you are basically delivering amazing value. Then you have your phone next to you, or camera that is recording you. And immediately after you end the recording, then you have the files that you can share with your team, and they can immediately create content from it. And it is just so powerful because it puts you in control of the content. And even if the podcast is audio only, you still record a video that you can use.
And yeah, sorry, I was just going to say what we're now doing with all of our clients, because of the delay in time. So once the podcast has been recorded, there is typically, with most of the podcasts that our clients are on, there's normally at least 4-week delay. Not often a podcast now turned around sort of within a couple of weeks, because it takes time. It takes time to get everything up together. We are now lowering the time between the recording and the ROI that our clients are seeing, because we can then take control with our clients over what can be distributed in conjunction with the host. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But straight away, you can be getting ROI, feedback, start doing a little promo, and driving that results that you need off the back of that podcast without having to wait for the podcast interview to come live.
Yeah, and this idea was really born after observing some of the biggest creators and how they do it. But also, after working with more than 100 customers, we are always thinking how can we decrease the time to value, right? And it was always such a big leap from recording to published. And this is actually something that solves it quite well. So the step one is to prepare your tech. So considering that you already are invited on podcast, you're about to join, just make sure that you prepare your tech. Maybe you have a tripod, you have a smartphone. Always use your back camera. It's just much better quality. And record your sound too. So you can either record your sound directly into your computer, or if you have a really good phone, the microphone on your phone might be actually enough to record your sound.
Couldn't use a Nokia 3310.
No. Step two, join the recording. Nothing to really say here. Just join the recording on time and with your tech prepared. Start recording, record yourself as you are recording the podcast interview. Then after the episode is recorded, send these raw video and possibly audio files to your team, and they can immediately start working on your content. So whilst the podcast will still be waiting, not waiting, but they will be you will be in queue to be published. You will already start creating content on your end. And lastly, you need to obviously distribute. Again, that's the most important part. And sometimes what we hear from people when we are sharing this strategy, people are asking, what about podcasters? Do they mind? Is it something that they're like, why are you publishing it? It's not live yet. And it's a fair question, and it's all about how you frame it, right? Because if you say, hey, I just been interviewed on this podcast and you can listen to this to the full episode before it goes live here, then it's probably not the best way to promote it, right? But if you share a short snippet from the video that you recorded and you say, just had an amazing time with John from this podcast, this is just a snippet, cannot wait to share the full episode with you once it goes live, stay tuned, then it's completely different story. So always make sure that when you're using this strategy, you frame the content when you're distributing it right, so you actually help the podcast host.
Jakub, just going to have a quick recap of those steps, if you don't mind. So sure. Number one, prepare the tech. Pretty straightforward. Number two, even more straightforward, join the recording. Obviously, hit record, which is number three. Record yourself. Number four, send that raw video and audio files, if you're doing it separately, to your team or to whoever it is that is going to be editing this on your behalf. And number five is the one that we've been sort of trying to really hammer home today. Distribute. Please do distribute. Otherwise, all of this is absolutely pointless.
And just to recap the concept, like what's this strategy about? It is that you are setting basically the tech on your end. You're not relying on the host. And when you are, imagine that I would have phone here. Now I'm using my phone as a camera. Imagine that I would have camera here. And as I'm delivering this webinar, I would be recording myself. And then immediately after this webinar, I can use this content. So that's what you want to do with your podcast recording.
Jakub, just had a really good question from Vanessa, one that probably a lot of people are thinking about. Using a phone to record a podcast, it may be sort of 30 minutes long, could be longer in most cases. Is it easy to share / send that video?
Let me check the question. Not sure if I understood.
I think she's thinking about the size of the file.
Right. Yeah, obviously, like if you record like full HD video, then it will take some time. I would definitely use some Google Drive, not email to send this file. Or you can use tools like WeTransfer, to upload this longer file. It will take definitely some time to upload depending on your internet speed, but you need to deliver it to your content team somehow. And you can use Dropbox, Google Drive, WeTransfer, whatever really works for you.
Yep. Awesome.
So by following this strategy, you can create high quality, expert level content without a headache of brainstorming content topics. So as we were mentioning in the beginning, just sitting and recording content, it is hard. When you are being asked questions and you just answer questions, it's easy. It's just much easier to create content that way. And also you will create content that you would probably wouldn't think about yourself, because, when you're being asked questions, the other person is, challenging your beliefs, and they're exploring why you believe what you believe. And it is difficult to do on your own. So Elle,
should you use podcasts to create your content? So you should use this strategy and these are all things that we've got to our disposal. Maybe number two is probably the only debate. you are on podcasts. Presumably you're here listening to us two talk and waffle on about podcasting content if you are somewhat interested in podcasting and content. So you've got to have an episode live or have some form of mechanism to get them booked, and we can absolutely help you with both of those. You've got the resources, so you either do it in-house, you've got an agency, or you may well work with a freelancer to do it for you, and you can distribute. There is absolutely no excuse for the final part. You can distribute. It is down onto you.
Awesome. And I see that we have some questions. We'll open the floor for Q&A in a second. But before we do it, there's actually an offer, the free offer that is actually crazy. This is something that we normally sell, but because you're on this webinar, this is what you can do. So if you already have an episode live, go to speakonpodcast.com/free. The website will look like this. This is the website. And all you have to do is just fill in your first name, your email, and you will paste your podcast episode URL, and you will click send me content. And after a couple of days, you will receive 3 ready to post social media videos, 3 thumb-stopping images. And after you submit the form, there will actually be a secret podcast offer. So if you're doing it right now, do not close the page after you submit the content, because I recorded a short 1-minute video. We're opening a pilot program, which is something absolutely amazing. And Elle will actually share a little bit more about it now. So if you want your free content, go to speakonpodcast.com/free and fill in these details, and we'll send it to you in a couple of days.
Awesome. Thanks, Jakob. The final thing is also, any questions that you've got, can you please start just populating the Q&A now, because we're going to be going through that in just a second, and it would be good to have those somewhat prepped. But we do have a special offer, and this, we have listened to a lot of our clients, a lot of founders, a lot of execs, and this offer is geared directly to busy founders, busy execs that I presume we all are. And it is for the first 5 people only. Normal pricing for our service to try and book you onto episodes and book you onto podcasts is £2,500 a month. We've got a special offer, which is 60% discounted for the first 5 people at only £1,000 a month. So that's for the first 5 people, an unbelievable deal to come and work with us over at Speak On Podcasts, alongside the free offer as well.
Yeah, we basically figure out the way how we can deliver the service much cheaper without compromising on the quality. So you will experience the same service, the brands on the bottom experience, just, for a fraction of the cost.
Awesome. Should we answer some questions? All right.
Yeah, let's dive into them.
First question, Jakob, from Mark Cronin. Is it worth going back in time and using this method for sharing content from podcasts recorded / released in the past? Could we do it with a year-old podcast, for example?
Well, it depends if that content is still relevant. If you're talking about a category that you're trying to push, it's probably something that is evergreen. If you're talking about an event that already happened, then it's not the best idea. So there's not like one answer that I could give you. It always depends on the podcast episode. So give it a listen, or maybe just, go through it quickly. If you hear something relevant there, it's worth repurposing. But if it was about something specific that is happening in short time after you recorded the episode, then I wouldn't use this strategy.
From Nicola Snell, is it okay to send a webinar instead of a podcast? Nicola, very cheeky. Cheeky.
I think it is. You can send your webinar.
Jakob, you're generous. Andy Brown, does it matter if you are on a panel podcast? Can your content still be pulled out? Yes.
Yes.
So long as you've got a time within that panel that you are talking solo, or you're adding value, absolutely. Absolutely, we can have a look at that. Roberto, question, are you going to share this recording with us afterwards? Yes. Yes, we absolutely are. There's going to be an email coming out.
We'll be sharing that email follow-up with the last webinar as well. So before we receive some other questions, you can still go here, speakonpodcast.com/free. And if you're not sure actually about how to find your episode. I can show you how to do it. So you will go to listennotes.com. Can you see my screen? Can you see Listen Notes?
Yeah.
Awesome. You will search for your name. So you would go to Jakub Zajíček. Well, that's my name, but you will search for your name. And then you click that you're not a robot. I hope you're not. And you will sort it by date here, by date. And you will see your latest podcast appearance here. And you basically just choose the one that you want to repurpose. So go to Listen Notes, write your name in quotes, and share the episode with us on speakonpodcast.com/free. And don't close the thank you page. There's that special deal.
I think there's been a couple of questions in
the chat,
webinar chat, not in the Q&A. I'm not sure I understand Indranil's question. What is the approx distribution reach channels for the £1,000 deal?
So basically, if you would work with us for £1,000 per month, how many people you can reach? Impossible to answer on this webinar because we don't know your audience. If you want to reach broad, audience of just, let's say, entrepreneurs, then it can be in thousands or tens of thousands. But then if you want to reach, let's say only B2B marketers in SaaS, then it can be in hundreds, but these hundreds people will be super relevant for you. So, the reach is not the most important metric to look into. And it cannot be answered without more information. But you can book a call with Patrick and he will share everything, if you go to speakonpodcast.com/May.
I got a cracker of a question from Stanley.
Ooh.
How well does this work for B2B? I understand the B2C, but lack of confidence in the B2B space.
That's a good question. And most of our customers, I would say, well, we maybe had one customer who was in B2C space. And it was a customer who was selling supplements, and he was crazy how much supplements he sold. But anyway, it depends if you want to be active on social media, and I would definitely recommend that you should. So we promoted this on LinkedIn, and we got most of our customers on LinkedIn, and we are only B2B. So if you are turning your podcast content into social media snippets that you will then distribute on LinkedIn, where your target audience is most probably active, then it is efficient. And most of our customers, well, all of them right now are B2B. All the logos that you can see in the bottom part of the page, they are all B2B customers. And most of them use this strategy to basically build brand awareness, and stay top of mind by sharing content.
I think there's a misconception that podcasts are bigger in the B2C space, a massive misconception. Mm-hmm. Because like you say, you look at, our tagline at the very bottom there is trusted by experts from top B2B brands. We are largely 99.9% of our clients are B2B brands. And every single listener on the other end of the podcast is in some way, shape or form, either a potential customer, a potential client, a potential partner. So I think it's more of an education and just a misunderstanding that the B2B space is not leveraging podcasts. Yeah. It's huge. Absolutely.
One thing to mention about B2B, the listenership of these podcasts will be much lower in B2B than like broad B2C podcasts. And it's simply because there are, these B2B podcasts are very often much more narrow focused than B2C podcasts. So it's absolutely worth it for you to speak to 200 people who are your perfect decision makers, because you spent 1 hour or 45 minutes to talk to 200 of your best, customers. That's totally worth it. Like you wouldn't say no to a keynote, to a speech to 250 people who are literally your buyers. Now you can do the same things with podcasts. So don't only look at the metrics and reach, look always on relevancy.
Cool. I think we have come to the end of the webinar, Jakub.
I see that Indranil mentioned audience. I asked that ICP B2C learners in STEM subjects. So what I see here is it could be, students, depends on the age, but there are definitely STEM podcasts, but STEM podcasts very often invite people from the STEM field. One of our first customers was actually targeting very similar audience. So again, we would need to go a little bit deeper, who exactly you want to reach. But based on this description, if it's STEM, then it might be doable.
Awesome.
Awesome stuff.
Had a lot of thank yous. Thank you guys for attending. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules to listen to both Jakob and I chat away and enjoy ourselves, indulging for the last 50 minutes or so. If you want to take advantage of both offers, click on the links. There's going to be an email coming out either later on today or tomorrow with all the information, all the slides. And if you guys want to listen to this again, feel free to do so. We also would love some feedback. So we typically do a webinar every 6 to 8 weeks on various different topics. Please do give us your feedback on what you enjoyed, what you didn't enjoy. Go steady, but also be honest. We want to be able to wake up happy tomorrow. And if there are any ideas on things that you would like to learn about within the podcasting space, podcast guesting or content, then let us know in that feedback form, because we would love to deliver you guys even more value.
I actually have an idea of what we could discuss during the next webinar. It's something that we haven't discussed, and again, hugely under-leveraged strategy. Different strategies to build, to leverage relationship with the podcast host, because that's the one guaranteed interaction you will have on every podcast. So I think that might be another interesting topic.
Awesome.
Awesome stuff.
Jakob, I loved it. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys.